Right. Cool. So I think there's a few more people that will be logging in, so we'll probably leave it for a couple of minutes just to let other people join. There were quite a few people signed up, a lot more than that anyway. So yeah, so it'll be going out on the people that signed up and booked in, they get an option of Zoom, and then there'll be other people watching on YouTube Live. But when we tested it the other day, they're 25 seconds behind. So
That's cool. It's showing you the broadcast on YouTube. I haven't seen that in Zoom before. That's neat.
Yeah. It's good. It's good. So give it another minute for other people. I thought it was quite good that you said that you weren't going to take any of the prep questions.
Brave. Might be foolish. Time will tell.
Might be foolish. Yeah.
Okay. I just think I'd rather deal with what comes as opposed to prepare. If that's okay.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
I'm apologies in advance. That's not good enough, but we'll go.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, I think the bit I find funny, like watching the video, like so in last July you did like the talk bit, and then that was about like 10, 15 minutes or something. Really good, really good. And I know you haven't looked at it again yourself, but I thought it was really good. And anyway, then it goes on to questions, and you went, I'll take any questions from anyone except for Toby.
Yeah. I felt this is because I felt I owed you, because that was a mean thing of me to do. I did try and retract it. There's a moment when I was like, I will take a question from Toby if needed. But yeah, I thought I owed you this as a result of that slight thing.
And you've given me
carte blanche.
Like carte blanche. Yeah. No preparation on any of the questions.
No.
And
I do know the door is though.
My laptop's here, right? And
you've got screen protector, so I can't see anything on it.
Yeah. Really secure.
Yeah.
And they're not that bad.
Okay. I'm not sure I believe you, but we'll see.
Well, these are people have submitted questions, and then I've made some up.
Yes. They're definitely questions. That's the main thing, because the last thing I wanted was for there to be no questions. That was my biggest fear of the whole talk. Was like I get through my 15 minutes and then it's like a tumbleweed and silence, and no one's got any questions. So
yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. Well, everyone's had a chance to get in. The other people might join us, and then there'll be people on. So we're looking at Zoom here, the Zoom webinar system, which is great. Then there will be people on YouTube. If anybody's on YouTube, you're listening to me 25 seconds after I've spoken, but you are welcome to ask questions using the comment section on YouTube. And we have some brilliant assistants off screen who are working behind the scenes to put those questions into the Q&A system, which is part of Zoom. So thanks very much to everyone that's logged on. This is the first time, this is the MVP, the most MVP of MVPs of something we just thought, wow, this could be fun, couldn't it? And it came from the idea that we do Agile on the beach once a year, and we have some brilliant speakers, and it's really interesting. The speakers talks are then put onto YouTube, and people can watch them afterwards and things. But it's very much it's almost like it happens once a year, and that's fine. But of course, last year we started on the whole AI. I started introducing some talks about AI and how that's affecting software development, because it is certainly 2025 seemed to be the year that things really started accelerating. And so Steve Smith and myself, we were chatting about stuff. There's various different people, there's a speaker committee talking about it. We're all sort of talking about, this AI thing, it's changing so fast. And actually it presents quite a challenge when you're running a conference, because how can you plan for what's going to be topical in 6 months' time? So people have submitted talks in sort of October, November time. Got a huge number of talk submissions, hundreds and hundreds of people submit talks or call for papers to come and speak, and then they're selected in the sort of early part of December, which is like 6 to 7 months ahead of the main conference and things. So, somebody might have written the most interesting talk about whatever topic, but if you're talking about AI, then actually, it might be completely superseded. So we thought, well, actually, why don't we do some sessions throughout the year? And this is hopefully, and this is an MVP. It's going all right so far, I hope. And we'll see. But the plan is potentially, if it goes well enough, we might do another one and another one. And basically invite different speakers from last year to come and give maybe an update on, or maybe even get some speakers for next year, this coming conference. And basically just provide some, interesting conversations around what are the really key topics from, in software development, in Agile, and, let's keep that conversation running actually throughout the year because things are changing. So I mentioned, so that's a sort of big introduction, big long introduction. As I say, Olly brand, we've known each other for a little while. I'll tell you a secret, actually. It's not a real secret, but we used to share a car trailer together.
We did.
But there was a divorce.
There was a divorce.
But that was...
Was it acrimonious? No, what's the word? It was amicable.
It was a very amicable divorce. It's in my garage now, it's really yours, but I mean, that's... and your wife's happier.
Yes,
and,
this is true.
Yeah. So it's but yeah, the talk last year, as I mentioned earlier, was really interesting. I thought it was really interesting. Steve Smith said he was actually bouncing. He was literally just, and if you know Steve, that's you need headroom for him to be able to bounce. And he kept saying throughout the day, he said, that just went so well, Toby. That's exactly what we want. And it's kind of actually that talk. I'm not going to big you up too much. The door's only that wide to get out. But actually, it has sort of shaped how we're thinking about talks, particularly anything involving AI, in terms of making sure that it is experience led. It's not there's so many people commenting and putting their view out about AI and it does this, or I don't think it should do this, or I think it's good at this but can't do that. But loads of people are commenting about it, but how many people are actually commenting about how they're using it? And so that it has actually shifted the focus of the conference, actually, so that we're actually really focusing on people that have actually done stuff and they're going to tell their story about how they're actually using it in real life. So we're not talking about professional commentators that aren't actually using it, they're just commentating about it. It's really focusing on real people that are actually using AI in real life, which every day
makes it even harder for your point earlier around the fact that you can't have a talk and then in 6 months' time deliver the talk, because 6 months in the lifetime of AI is a lot. So there's a lot I got interestingly wrong from my talk that at the time was right and what I experienced, and then literally a month later, I think agents being the best example, because I wasn't anti-agent, but I wasn't clear on what I meant by it. And then literally, I think the month after my talk, just everything moved into doing it agentically. So whereas I was like augmented and not copy pasting code, but just using it as a buddy, a coding assistant, the narrative and the switch became actually, no, you want to defer more to the agent, you want to let it run, you want to let it go. And it's that sort of thing, like you say, you can't, if I just said my talk was watch how I augment my work with AI by delivering it in 6 months, it'd be a completely different talk.
That's yeah. I did. I must admit, so I've watched it a few times this week actually, and I was like,
Lucky.
oh, agentic. I'm not sure you.
No, so I meant, so for full context, when what I was talking about agentic was being outside the IDE and just talking down the command level, like core code as an example, and just sending your prompt in and then not really being that close to the code. So for me, that's what I meant by the time agentically, because Cursor already was using agents inside its IDE, but you were still close to the code, and that's kind of where my mindset was, and to a certain extent still is. But it was just fascinating to see that as a point that I kind of raised and mentioned, and then already be outdated in a month. It's like, wow, this is moving at a pace that even I can't predict. And it just has continued. It's just ramped up and up and up. In October, I did a kind of like a follow-up post to say, like, this is what I meant by agentic. This is what's happened since. And even that got outdated in November. And then December, we had Opus 4.5 land, and that just shook things up yet again. And it just never sits still. It's a fascinating journey to be on. I think that the biggest thing that's currently floating around in my head is, am I wedded to an IDE and code because that's what I know and that's 20 plus years of my career? Or is that the best way to be working with AI? Or actually, should I be stepping back more and leaning on core code and forget the IDE and maybe even forget the pull requests, find out a way to automate and go on those kind of journeys? And that's very much where I'm looking and experimenting now. It's never a dull moment. It's just fascinating and so fast in how it moves. Hopefully some of your questions will ask around that, because I've got some answers.
Yeah. Have you got anything else you want to say to just sort of kick off, or should we just carry on? Just
No, that was my biggest takeaway from the talk, from what I remember of the talk. As you said, I'm not watching it back, but it was that, how fast it's moving, and your point around the fact that how do you have a talk in 12 months' time and paper submitted, because that's, who knows who we're going to be when the talk happens in July, which I'm hoping I can capitalize on and then deliver an even more interesting talk, because I don't know what I'm going to say and no one knows what I'm going to say, and the world doesn't know what AI is going to look like at that time. So hopefully that's interesting to you and to our listeners.
Yeah, I mean that agentic piece, actually getting multiple agents to use different LLMs each on work. Are you using that, or are you finding like
Yeah, so that's all I really do. So Cursor for me is still my kind of go-to and the one I would prefer over all options, because it's closeness to the code. But even inside that, you can send multiple tasks out to agents, you can run on cloud, you can do whatever you like from inside Cursor, but it still brings back the code. I can press Command and switch to the code and I can still see the code.
Yeah.
But taking a step back, I've been playing at the weekend with Codex and the actual Mac client that OpenAI have released. And that it has a kind of code view, but it really just gives you a terminal, a prompt, and you just have a continual ongoing dialogue with ChatGPT, and it's just literally sat there. You go along typing in what you want to do, and I just built this Obsidian plugin. So I've never built an Obsidian plugin before, but I wanted a way of just moving my tasks around. I tried building an MCP first, and that was a bit of a disaster. So I just actually paring it back. What I really need is an ability to get tasks from Obsidian into OmniFocus and tasks from OmniFocus into Obsidian on hotkeys. And it just wrote in less than an hour this perfectly working plugin with little bits of steers all the way through, just from having a chat and a dialogue. And I didn't touch the code. I did check it into Git just because I wanted to see how Codex worked with Git and see what that flow would look like. But I didn't review anything. I didn't check anything. I took that step back from the code, and it felt weird. It felt really weird. But what I don't know and what I'm trying to experiment with, and my point of raising it, is that the future. And I think in my position, head of engineering with 9 engineers, I need to be looking at where are our bottlenecks. If we're chucking out code at a 10x, how are we PRing it? How are we safely releasing that into production? And that's where all these tools, and having the experience of all these tools, you need to review it from not just the perspective of what's the output, but how do you actually get that output usable, deployed, and the guardrails and the safety in place. Does that make any sense? I felt that was a long monologue.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think about 6 days ago, actually, Dave Farley was talking, did a really interesting talk in his on the software engineering thing about this, the cadence and the frequency of the more frequently you're making changes, the more frequently you need to test that.
Yeah.
And his view is that you should be, every functionally working release should be integrated into your code base, continuous delivery style, so that you've just got this So you always, that fundamental principle of like maintaining working software. Do you follow that?
Yeah, and in two different ways. So one is I'm building tests first. So I'm not quite TDD, I wouldn't lay that claim, but definitely building tests first, if not early in the process, because that way you can validate what's broken, what hasn't broken, and I can also look at the quality of the code in the tests and decide if that's actually where I think it should be, or if it's just AI trying to please me. And then the second thing is every time AI makes a mistake, or every time AI goes off script, I try and bring it back in with a rule, and we try and get that into the code base itself. So therefore, you only really hit the same problem once, and you get that compounding. And that means you're going to be producing a higher quality of output with less chance of bugs, or higher compliant with what you want it to do. Because if you're constantly putting your preference in, and constantly updating your preferences through success and failure, so at the end of a PR, getting it to update, that builds this compounding process, and it builds that surety of the code coming out and improves the code quality. So I think I agree with Dave very much on that. That if you have the tests set, you know if something's broken, and then if you continue to iterate on this process, success and failure, baking that into the code, you'll see higher grain of output coming out, and you'll have less concerns, and you can trust the code more, and the process itself gets better with each iteration too. And that, I think that compounding is critical, because if you don't have that, then you're just you could be making more bugs than you could ever realize, or just not realizing and sending bugs in and compounding your problems the other way.
Interesting. So I mean, this whole the issue around bugs is one of the sort of major concerns that people have about AI. That well, there's a number of different concerns, aren't there, really? But this concern that actually, do you know how many bugs you're producing if you're not really properly testing, or you're not, but before we go on to that,
just one time point on that. So even that narrative has shifted, though. If you think about this, when we were talking about this, we've had this chat last year. We've been talking about hallucinations and laughing about all the hallucinations that AI is doing. Now we're talking about bugs, and bugs are quite specific. It's not necessarily hallucinating; it's just making a small mistake, or it hasn't spotted something upstream that was impacted. That evolution from there to there is 6 months, and already that is a game changer. And it's really trying. It's a silly statement to make, but I'm going to make it anyway. The Opus 4.5 codes better than I do. I just didn't think that would be where we were going to be with AI in December, but it generally produces output for code quality higher. And I look at it and I think, yeah, that's better at coding than I am. And it's okay. It's admittedly that's mostly Node and JavaScript, the language it's trained on the most, but it's still, I think, of a quality where it's comparable to better than me.
So this is one of the other sort of challenges I think people have I've sort of read about, actually, is that it's writing some code, but how do you know that that's really good code, and is it maintainable code? Is it code that's replicable? Is it how good is that code compared to like having a human doing it?
So I think that's crucial, because that's where the taste element comes in, which is also the vogue topic at the moment, of like your experience and your ability to judge whether something's good or bad is huge. But also, coming back to my compounding point, you need to be baking that into the tools. You need to be telling it, this is how we code. So I love Cursor for this, because it will go and index all your code, and you can just ask it, like, write me a how we code rule, and it will go away and it will come back with that. And often it will actually come back and surprise you and say, you've got 5 styles that you need to do. For these files, we'll apply this. For this, you need to do that. In these circumstances, do this. And it learns all that from your code base. So all the good stuff you put in there is there for you to see warts and all. Because if there's some bad stuff in there, you can then obviously amend that and change it, or say, no, Cursor, I disagree with this. Or in the worst case scenario, just hand code it yourself. But it's that side of it is truly, truly impressive, I think. I haven't yet experimented with Codex in terms of doing this similar sort of thing, but with Cursor, it's just incredible.
Yeah, I must admit, and just seeing how it's developed. They're introducing planned mode in October, was it?
Yeah.
And then ask and debug mode, and
that's my entire flow is plan. I just live off plan mode. Sometimes I will go in and just plan stuff, even if I'm not doing it, just to get a feel for how Cursor thinks it should be done, how long it would take, and that's factoring into my estimation processes as well. And then you can query it from that plan as well, and you can obviously output that plan. And the other thing I'm loving is the Atlassian MCP connection, where I'll just tell it to put that plan into Jira tickets and an Epic, and I just press a button and it does it. I had one particular challenge where we came out of about a 3-hour meeting and we had the transcripts on, and I foolishly said, I'll get this into Jira in 15 minutes. let's have a 15-minute break. Everyone's going to get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, whatever, and come back in 15 minutes and have it in Jira. And I had no idea if it was going to work or not. And I threw the transcript over Claude Code, and I just said, put this into an epic and task, as we discussed. And it did it. It did a solid epic with a great overview and understanding, and it broke it down to 10 tasks. And it even, just as the icing on the cake, did the dependencies and said which tasks were blocking which tasks actually inside of the Jira bit. And at that point, I was like, well, this is awesome. Because for me to have done that probably would have been a day, if not longer. And very frustrating. And it also meant for the follow-on work that we could then 15 minutes later go into that call and review those Jira tickets and say, fresh in our minds what we've just spoken about, how good is it? Yeah. And it was 90+% there. We changed very little of the things we went in and done. And that sort of pattern is repeating. And that then, this whole compounding loop again, those Jira tickets become the context then you can steer other things from. So you can take one of those Jira tickets, bring it into cursor through the MCP and say, okay, plan this, step through it. And then you can tell it to go back and update the Jira ticket with your plan and those other bits. So you're kind of building this constant context. And you said, how do you know if it's good or not? Well, you're baking that into the process. You're baking, garbage in, garbage out. You're baking quality in, quality out.
Yeah.
Each iteration.
And that I find is the really interesting thing is because you're talking about approaching software. The way you're using it is cursor, which is you can get really close to the code. You can improve every individual line. Yeah. Change and every single change line by line, and or you can just say
YOLO. I get that wrong all the time. Yeah, that's where I'm at now with my kind of reasoning processes. I don't want to burn my entire team out. I don't want to just turn them into PR robots. What can we do with the tooling? And almost like Claude are reading our mind, they've released a new PR skill in the latest version of Called Code that I want to test. I've got this naive ambition of I would really like to have overnight all of our code just being reviewed and it come up with suggestions for fixes. So again, you're asking about what's good is. I want to tell it what good is. I want to tell it how I like the coding to be done. I want it to go and look and see where the anti-patterns are. And I want it to suggest what those are. And having just said I don't want the team to be PR monkeys, I do want to have a setup where, in the morning you come in and it says, I've got these 20 possible fixes I think would be good, and it's ranked them, and people can go through and pick off the PRs and say yes, this is good, or no, this is bad, and use that as again a feedback loop. So say, okay, well, you've picked these 20 things, actually 18 of those things aren't really right, update the rules to reflect that those are actually okay, and for these two, yes, these are significant, update the rules to reflect and ensure we don't have these things happen again. And each one of those iterations that you go through, if you're doing that nightly, the amount of value you'll get out of it, I think, would be huge. And then I think that the other challenge as a manager is I need to put the guardrails in to say, when is it acceptable to YOLO and when do you need to do the line by line step through PR? And that's going to be different for every business. And obviously for us, bidding is critical. Auction end time is critical. Anything that affects bidding or auction end is going to need to be significantly reviewed. But where are the opportunities in the site to potentially get features out quicker, unblock things faster by bypassing the PR and effectively living and dealing with the consequences, knowing that at night we have a constant review cycle and set of processes that's ideally getting better, learning what we're looking for, learning to get ahead of ourselves and kind of acting as a night manager, if you like.
Yeah. So I must say, I've been using Sneak to do that sort of reviews of Git. So, and then all of a sudden you get an email in the morning going, oh, we found this potential vulnerability. And you're like, oh, wow. And then so some of these other automated tools working in the background to support that.
We use BugBot already to do PR things, and we've got PandaBot as well to catch those things. But it's more like having like an architectural review every night. Again, defining what good is, I think, is the biggest challenge in that setup, and saying what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and trying to get the AI to think for itself. I see a lot of the things like Gastown and the orchestrations and the swarming, and those things are really exciting, but I'm not entirely convinced that's a route I can access yet. That's something I want to play with in the distance. I think right now that would just create me more problems, more carnage, more chaos, more churn. But it's undeniable that's a very exciting prospect if you're a business owner, that you might have one developer and they are the person that runs all of your orchestrations and all of your AI, and you have one AI that does your reviews, one AI or many AIs that do your coding, and that's fascinating, but that just seems at the moment a bridge too far. Now I've stated that will definitely be next month when it works perfectly, and I'll come back and say,
hang on. Right, okay. By the way, there is a Q&A button somewhere at the bottom of your screen if you're watching, if you're logged into Zoom. So if anybody watching wants to ask any questions, I do have a couple of questions here ready, and I think there's some more coming in as well. But please do ask your questions, and we'll obviously read those out and then we'll get Olly to answer them. So these are questions of Olly. No difficult questions for me. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I was it's funny actually reading my mind. I was going to come on to this whole thing, which is I kind of certainly in my experience, the bane of life when you're dealing with, I mean, I was hearing stories the other day about client from hell, the stakeholder from hell, whatever, and their expectations just being like completely off the scale, I mean, and we're hearing more and more, certainly if you read around this topic online at the moment, well, actually, certainly over the past 12 months, there's sort of let's be polite, the inexperienced CEO or inexperienced COO or coming up with these sort of ideas. They read an article, probably incited by some exaggerating consultancy that wants to try and impress. So there are, in my view of the world, there's two types of consultancy. There's ones that aim for the C-suite and just want to sell them, £5,000 a day advice, and then there's those that aim below the C-suite. And actually, the problem with the first lot is that they'll excite CEOs and certain members of the C-suite, and by telling them stuff that is blatantly untrue, but might be something in the future. And with AI, of course, there's the stuff that, it might be able to do this in the future, but that doesn't mean you can do it now. Then the CEOs come running in and go, hey, right, Olly, we only need one of you now. So from what you've just said, is it you or somebody else? Yeah. And the thing is that for years, decades now, I've been trying to educate business owners that are looking to have projects delivered and saying, if you just have one person, you've got this massive redundancy issue. If that person wins the lottery and buys a yacht and you never see them again, you are absolutely.
I think the problem's the other way around as well, because I'm not getting drawn in the consultancy debate, but if you think about one person and what they can accomplish, if they're 10x, that's great, that's fantastic. They replace a team of 10. If you have 10 people, it's obviously a massive increase of their 10x. That's 100. That's still 10 times what you can achieve and do. And also, if you've got 10 people looking at what's going on in the world and bringing it all back, my role is really looking across all the engineers and saying what's working, bringing that back, giving it out to them, challenging them, asking them questions, supporting their journey, learning it. If you have got one person just doing all of that on their own, their chance of success are low. I think Jevons paradox is the thing that's bounced around loads, where in the Victorian times it was assumed that machines were just going to put everyone out of jobs. It was just there's going to be no point to it. And in reality, the machines created even more jobs, because as price went down, demand went up. And therefore there was more and more need for what was being produced and what was done. So I can very much see that being the software engineering journey. That's the happy path. The unhappy path is that people are right and orchestration will come and slowly start to take over our jobs. But your CEO expectation example is huge, because I think there's so much out there in the news every day about how this is going to replace our jobs, how this is the next best thing, and then followed by AI is going to go bust tomorrow, and they're all going to go bust because they're all just swapping tokens and credits, and it's all VC backed, and it's all just going to come down like house of cards. And as ever, I think the truth will lie somewhere in the middle. And what I'd encourage anyone that's feeling anxious about it is to just go and play. Like £15 a month ChatGPT or Claude Code subscription enables you to have access to these tools. And okay, you need to watch your credit spend on those accounts, but it will give you some experience and some idea of what's coming. And then there's a fantastic book, Vibe Coding, by Steve Yegi and Gene Kim. Steve Yegi is the person that's made Gastown one of the biggest orchestrators going. And that's fascinating. Just watching that journey and following his blog and reading that book is a great shout. But how you manage in this time is just fascinating. This is the biggest shift I've seen in 23, 24 years of working in tech. It's quite insane. You've got every angle coming at you of like, this is the angle. You've got developers that don't want to do it because they don't want to lose their skills. You've got CEOs that, like you say, think that actually I don't need a tech team anymore. I'm just going to do it all myself on my phone, talking to Slack, which is going to go away to Quadbot and create me everything I ever wanted. And, Quadbot itself has blown up massively with people losing credentials left, right, and centre, and all sorts of other things happening. So, it's a fascinating time. It's never a dull moment. And it's I'm hoping people are picking up on that from this.
Yeah. I mean, there's that sort of glass half full, half empty kind of approach to that.
I'm full on there.
But I mean, actually enabling businesses to do things which otherwise wouldn't have been affordable.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've just built a WordPress plugin for the fiber, the building's website, because I'd spent probably 5 or 6 hours trying to find a piece of software that would do what I needed it to do.
Yeah.
And it's really complicated because these rooms are booked on an hourly slots and those rooms are booked on a half-day slots. And it's got to integrate with Office 365 calendar. But and it's just like I was looking and searching. I spent hours and hours and hours, and it's taken me less time to actually to build a WordPress plugin, which I've never done before, by the way.
Yeah, the same with my Codex experience with my task management system, 45 minutes of chatting, and I've got a working piece of software solving a problem that I use every single day. The leverage on it is huge. And we've seen similar. So one of our engineers, or principal engineer, in fact, and our director sat down for 2 days and wrote a photo booking app. So we don't have a photo booking system per se. We had a person that was responsible for that, and it was a large part of their day. And if they're out, what happens? If they, have a bad day, what happens? And that's all been replaced in 2 days of coding with this app that we can send out to photographers and say, go through this checklist, click here for your availability, accept this job here. It's all the management side is done through the app, done in 2 days. And that sort of leverage wouldn't have been possible. That would have been an engineering team doing it for maybe, being slightly melodramatic, maybe a month or 2 months, and the cost of that would way outweigh the cost of having the person doing it, or adding on to their time of their day. But it's those things which have become unlocked, and it's having that AI first mindset of how could AI solve? It's not this is impossible, or not I'm going to spend hours googling if there's a product, but how can I do this with AI? And the funniest thing is, the best thing is you can just go and ask AI that question. And if you don't know the answer from one of them, just ask the other and just play them off against each other and prompt your way through it.
Yeah,
it's fascinating. Sorry to jump back in, but I mentioned on the talk about our CRO who's trying to build that same photo app. Well, they've actually graduated from Lovable to now actually producing valuable things in Cursor, and they have no programming background or experience, but they found Lovable was holding them back, and that actually getting Cursor was the ticket they needed, and they're brushing up and getting their skills in Cursor. But they still have a hard stop of like, I can't actually make this deployable, and the limit of their knowledge means that they can't actually get it out there. So even with the capabilities of Cursor and a very bright, highly motivated person, you still need a software engineer in the mix at the moment. And what you can achieve as a software engineer, I think, is also that much better because you have that taste and that ability to kind of converse and say, this isn't right, that's right, this isn't right, as opposed to blind faith accepting whatever comes out of the machine, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think, I mean, it's really interesting that, because, Lovable is, I've used it a few times and it's like, wow, it really is so easy, but it's so limited.
Yes.
And then, obviously Cursor is more like an IDE, but you need more knowledge and experience then. And, your COO, if you were playing, if you were, I don't know how you deal with him, but I'm sure he's
encouragement. He's very bright, very capable. So
yeah. But you say like, what's his test coverage like? And he goes,
there's none. There's none. That's what I mean by the engineering side. You need that engineering mindset is there and valuable, and that's hard earned through lots of experience and lots of things. But that means you can leverage that tool better than the someone that doesn't have that ability. I know that sounds like a really obvious trite statement, but it's the differentiator between being able to write something you can actually deploy and put live and use versus getting 80% of the way there and then needing a bit of tech help, which there's nothing wrong with needing that help. And there's lots of different ways around it, such as like containerizing things or getting it to run locally on someone's machine. Those are the things we've done in the past. But like the photo app being a good example, like they tried in Lovable to build the app as best they could, and they got it maybe 80% there. But the path from the final 80 to 100% wasn't 20%. It was more like doubling down the effort again, or a Windows 90%. It's just virtually impossible. Whereas Matt's app was built in 2 days, and then about 5 days later was able to be deployed and run. And that's the difference in skill sets. And that's still valuable in today's marketplace, I think.
So in terms of like, I'm thinking about the sort of future engineers. If let's assume that there still will be a role for engineers and things. But does the learning need to focus instead of like syntax of writing code? You need to be able to read code, but you don't need to be able to write it. Say the training is like this is how you create a deployment pipeline, yes, etc., etc.
Even that might go, but I think it's more like how you work with Git, how you architect software, how you develop your taste in what good software, bad software is. Because in theory, junior, senior engineer and experience will more come down to taste and what you can actually produce on the tool. So if you flip that around, now we reward experience, but what if the future metric is just what you can actually do and produce with the tool and get live? In that case, how will experience matter? Learning what to build, learning if it's good, learning how to work with the tools and get the best out of the tools, those kind of things. And like Git's a great example. Like trying to explain to someone that's not a software engineer Git is nigh impossible. And we've all spent years with Git and we still struggle with basic commands and stuff, but AI doesn't struggle. So you as an engineer plus AI equals awesome. It's regular person plus AI equals potentially awesome, but a lot of gaps I think you could train.
So we've got a few questions starting to come in. There's one that was actually pre-registered, and that's from Dave Pollard. In regards to future careers, what can people do now to best prepare them for an uncertain future?
Play with the tools, so understand what's coming. I can't implore that enough. If you take nothing else away from this, it's the same as I think I said in my talk, go and play so you understand what's coming. I think I saw a crazy stat, and I'll link to the article afterwards, but 4% of code committed on open repositories is now done by Claude Code. So one of the stat generation companies has been using the hardware that Claude uses and able to detect from all the open repositories what's going on. So it's a tipping point of like 4% has crept into the world. So there's still 96% being written by engineers, but you want to be on the right side of the track. You want to be using these skills, getting to understand how the tools work. And that could be, playing with Claude Code on the side if you can't do it as part of your day job, or it could be pushing in your day job to get something like Cursor if you haven't already. I would say that's my biggest tip and biggest takeaway.
So I'm trying to think how, so I mean, I often get asked by people say, what would you do to sort of get into tech or whatever? And so I think there's good advice there, but there's how many different tools are there that you're going to have to go through? I mean, it's like, it's going to take longer than doing a degree soon.
It is. So Michael Burry had this just awesome way of explaining this argument. So I'm going to steal his take on it. But in 1960, Warren Buffett owned a department store, and the department store opposite him stuck in an escalator at a huge expense. So he had to stick an escalator in to keep up with the department store. So though he made no money whatsoever from having the escalator, and the escalator was nothing but a pain in the arse and required lots of maintenance, he had to have it to equal the store next door. Now the consumer gains because they don't have to climb upstairs anymore. And it feels like the AI race is very much like that. If Claude goes and builds something, ChatGPT is going to have to build it regardless just to stay in the race. And although they might exchange tit for tat and Gemini's come up from pretty much behind, they're all going to have to start building similar things or work in similar ways. And getting into one and just focusing on that one gives you an opinion, it gets you skin in the game. And from there, it's quite easy to pivot into the others and see, especially if you're following along and seeing what's happening. There's a press release every week. There's a lovely video on YouTube, which will be, clickbaity. ChatGPT 5.x is the greatest thing ever. Some of those things are interesting to watch, but fundamentally, if you've got experience with one of those tools, you can take it to the others and start to see how the prompt flows. What I do find interesting is there seems to be the 3 split paths in my mind, which are, or 4, I suppose, including illustration. So the first one is the command line interfaces. The second one is the apps on top of those, where you just prompt and it gives you code. Then the third is cursor, which gives you a lot and keeps you close to the code. And then the fourth is the orchestration side. So I'd say if you are starting out, start with Claude Code or ChatGPT Codex, either the command line or the applications. And then, yeah, if you can in your professional day job, switch to Cursor or Windrush or any of the others, then that would be my route to doing it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. If you'll drown if you try and keep up with all of them, and that's to a certain extent that's kind of what my role is as head of engineering. So my engineers are they're laser focused. They're looking down their site. They're doing their day job. They're experimenting with what they're experimenting with, and my job is to look around at what everything is on the market, what could be better, what we could do better, and then to kind of work out how to get that into the team and how to get the leverage out of that for the business.
So there is a question relating to what you're talking about just before that, around how has your adoption of AI in this sense impacted your recruitment team scaling considerations? For example, if somebody handed in their notice tomorrow, would you backfill straight away or look for a different role of person? Expert prompter rather than expert coder? Or
backfill straight away, to be perfectly honest, and I would look for we have one less senior engineer and 8 senior engineers. I would go straight and look for a senior engineer, but that's because of where our startup is at and because of how lean we run. So as I was saying, we're not in a place where we're going to be able to go to one engineer. We have a backlog that will probably take 3 years to do, even if AI triples the productivity of our current team. So I would, in my situation, in a fast-paced startup, swap out a senior for a senior straight away. What I would say as a kind of follow-up to that question is that, again, not to be the biggest cursor champion ever, but a lot of the assumed knowledge that a person would have leaving the business is now starting to go into the code base. So all those rules I talked about and all that compounding, that can be used to help accelerate. And you mentioned cursor ask mode. Yeah. That again, the cursor's indexing your code, is understanding what's going on in it. It allows you as a person coming in new to a team to say, how does this work? And whereas before you might have needed assumed knowledge or someone in the team to walk you through it, now you can just say, well, you can get the answer from Cursor. Claude's gone down a slightly different route with this as well, with Claude Code, where they actually, if you go and ask it to explain your code base, it will fire off a load of haiku agents, sub-agents, and they'll go and bring a massive summary of what the whole code base does, bring it back, and then it'll put Opus 4.6 on top of that to summarize it for you and tell you. So where, again, there's differences in the tools, it's the same result though. Yeah, it's good. It's a good question.
Nice. Great question.
Just to answer, in a bigger environment, I don't know what I would do. In my old environment in IBM, I'd like to think we'd have a talent pipeline and we just would bring people through. So you lose someone going as an opportunity to bring someone more junior along, because that was our operation. But where I am now, we can't afford to do that at the moment.
So one of the things that you did mention in your talk in July was that I think it said something along the lines of, you feel that this whole question about junior developers, there'll be no need for junior developers, therefore we're destroying the pipeline, etc. And you argue quite convincingly against that approach, saying no, actually this enables junior developers to learn more quickly.
Yeah,
and
that argument stands, but that doesn't apply to where I need now to that direct question. Right, that makes sense. Yeah. So I think you, as a junior, you can learn far more. And what you were saying about your question of what would you learn? Like learning architecture, learning how Git works, learning how to get the best out of the tools. That's where I would focus my learning if I was a new entrant coming in. The problem's going to be there just aren't going to be that many junior jobs, because I need someone high leverage. And if you can get, say, a 10x out of a senior developer, and you get a 3x out of a junior developer, then suddenly the cost equation has switched. Suddenly your junior developer is actually more expensive because they don't get as much. You don't get as much out of them as you would out of your senior engineer. And I think nowhere in the history of time have we ever really had such a gap. And this is only kind of exaggerated that. I mean, you would expect, say, a senior engineer to be able to do 2 to 3 times more than a junior engineer can do. But now if you're saying you're going to 10x that and say, well, they can do 20 to 30 times more than a junior engineer that's got to come in and learn the ropes, it's different. It's harder, I guess, from that perspective. But it's easier to learn, harder to get that opportunity, if that makes sense.
So for those senior engineers that are really embracing AI, are they there? Do you see a situation compared to senior engineers I've met, but both of these types that are like, no, you can't use that yet. You know, no, it's rubbish. Or I'm not using it. You know, would you say that we should be expecting to see a wage shift? So the ones that are really embracing it and aren't be able to justify a 50% large salary.
I'm not seeing that. I just think it's going to be more successful in the workplace. And I hope it doesn't get to the point where it's binary of you have AI skills, therefore, and you can work with AI, therefore you have a job and a career path. You didn't engage and you're effectively saying, I'm not involved in IT anymore. But it does feel increasingly with each iteration, with each of the tool sets, like we are moving towards that being the situation. And we're not there yet. I mean, that 4% stat I batted around Claude Code, you can see the impact isn't as huge as people think. And I think there's a lovely graph saying about 10% of people are actually using AI to the level we're talking about and discussing now, and 90% aren't. And there'll be loads of environments where you can't use AI and you will need to program. But I'll just, to anyone that's vehemently saying, no, this is going on, this is going to die, I'd say, be careful, back yourself and have an alternative strategy, which we all kind of need, because who knows where it's going. Like I generally wrote a blog post in October and couldn't have predicted that in December Opus 4.5 would have come out and been as good as it was and changed it. And now ChatGPT's 5.3 is really good. Gemini's come pretty much from nowhere in the last year to dominating, and Google's in a prime position with all their investments in hardware and AI to take it further. So yeah, I'd say if you're not investing in AI because you think it's a fad, or you're not investing in AI because you don't think it's for you, I would double check that. Maybe have an experiment and a play and really back yourself, or research how to back yourself, I guess. Does that make any sense? I feel like I waffled that last bit. But...
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. Really interesting. So just a reminder, if you've just logged in, there's a Q&A button at the bottom. Ask any questions of Olly, and
otherwise I will just waffle.
So there's an interesting one. I can't remember when. Probably 10, 15 years ago or something. Pair programming. I can remember pair programming being introduced with some of the teams that I was working with, and the excitement about that was like, no, this is really good. This is really good. And then mob programming. The excitement around mob programming, and and this sort of kind of like, you have several people around one keyboard, one person on the keyboard, and everyone else is like working on the project at the same time and simultaneously and stuff. And the excitement and enthusiasm, particularly on some of those sort of really challenging or certain tasks. Say, for example, okay, we're going to interface with an API, and everyone's going to need to understand how this works in a team. So why do you have 5 people learning separately something when you're expecting to get consistency? And so there's some great arguments for doing this sort of, well, let's mob on it. Everybody works on the same thing. Yeah. And actually, you get consistency, you get consistent approach, knowledge sharing, all of it. That was the rage about mobbing and the arguments for it. Is that still relevant now?
It's difficult. So there's 2 elements to that. So the first is like Claude made a way you can share prompts. So 5 people and maybe people can all go in and share the same prompt, and you can work through. So you can kind of mob around an idea and all use AI and get that together, which I think is awesome. The other thing is, like, if an AI is well documented and well structured, do you need to learn it anymore? Because like all the stuff I just did with OmniFocus's API and writing a plugin for Obsidian, I could have learned the documentation, I could have worked that all out, or I could just prompt and say, with this API, go and do it. And I've just done some of the Workable, actually. I want to use Workable in NA10. So I want to pull in, I want to do a job, I won't go into details, but essentially it exists by the API. So I did go read the documentation of the API just to see if it was possible. And I read about a third of the doc and then was like, actually, a third of the endpoint, actually, I don't need to read this. I shall just dump this straight into Cursor and tell it to go and do it. And it went and did it. Common understanding, that common sharing, I've baked in the code. And then again, I keep harping on about this compounding element, but you can then code that into the rules. So, I'm building up rules for writing workable procedures. So I say, I don't want to do them in Python, so don't do them in Python, do them in JavaScript, because we're a no JavaScript company. And it just loads of stuff like that. Each iteration and each time you go through these, each time you bring on a new API, you put that in your rules about how you work and operate with it. And that shared knowledge then is there for everyone to use. You don't need to have the mod programmer to build everyone's shared knowledge, because the AI is already using it. And if you want to double click on it or so drill into it, you can go and read the MD file, or just stick it in ask mode and say, how does that API work? How would I interface with this? What do you suggest to bring that to the system? And my absolute favorite, plan mode. We can just say, plan mode, do this, and it'll come up with a plan for you. And you can say, I'm not sure on step 3, I think you'd better actually use this endpoint instead, or can you confirm that it's definitely that JSON structure, and it does it all for you. So I don't want to say it's dead. I want to give you an opportunity. You can say, actually do some prompting and grouping with people, but at the same time, everyone needing to learn an API, I think we might be moving beyond that being a thing.
Yeah. So that's really interesting, actually, really interesting. So moving on to, again, this is another of those sorts of arguments about where people are sort of concerned, oh, AI will take our jobs. And the counter argument is like, well, no, actually, so there's two ways a business could do two things. I mean, let's just say, for example, if it was true, I'm not saying it's true, let's not have that argument now, but let's say that an AI-enabled team is 3 times more productive. And I know, they can write
that's my benchmark. That's what I'm gunning for now. I want
that's what aiming for.
3 times more productive. Yeah,
but you're not there yet.
No,
because the code is being written in seconds or minutes instead of days.
Not everyone bought into the vision, everyone's bought into the journey. I don't want to burn the team out. I want to do it in a manageable way where they're excited, they enjoy it, they're building their skills in it, and everybody wins. The individual developer wins, the team wins, the company wins, because we're producing those features faster. And I genuinely, the turning point or the tipping point for me was seeing 4.5 and how it operates and works. I think that's what I'm going to get to. But to your argument around whether or not point around whether or not it's the end of software or other stuff, we just don't know. It's just, you'd be crazy to make that bet. You'd be crazy to make a bet whether AI is going to go bust in 2026 or not, and what that even looks like and what that even means anymore. But I think that 3x to me is the gold standard, and maybe this year it's achievable, and I can see a path to it. What's fascinating is like the gas town being a great example. You've got people that are connecting like 4 or 5 Claude accounts just to get the token limits out and producing like incredible things. And maybe one person, unicorns are going to be a thing as a result of that, but they tend to be at the moment where I see new things, not kind of brownfield or not things that are already effectively in operation or that kind of difference. So I'd be interested to see how much impact those things can have on brownfield, on existing companies and on businesses. But again, you're talking about the top, you talk about the top programmers in the world with pretty much unlimited resources. They are very much the vanguard of this. How much of that will trickle down and how long that will take, I don't know. And that's why it's fascinating, because it just changes every day.
Yeah, I mean, Claude,
started nowhere.
25th of November was the first commit, I think.
Yeah.
And like worth $1 billion now.
Yeah, and
so as a company.
And as a lovely other example, Claude code is written 90% by Claude code, so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But they still have some of the best engineers in the world on the highest compensations in the world. So that kind of in itself shows you that although that's a company that's building its own product, dogfigging its own product, doing everything its own product, it still massively values engineers and is hiring talented engineers the entire time and trying to keep their pipeline active. So what does it prove? Nothing other than I can waffle lots, really.
Yeah. So this sort of, that's the theoretical ideal that, or goal that at some point your department will be 3 times more productive. Mm-hmm. So your management are going to say, well, okay, we can either reduce the cost by 2/3 in order to achieve the same, roughly.
Yeah.
Or they can do. Actually, we can do 3 times more. So the backlog can suddenly start including, product owners, whereas previously they might have discounted or deprioritize features because they were too expensive to build.
Yeah.
The return on investment, that whole kind of business value return on investment piece didn't stack up. So therefore it would be like, no, we can't do that. Oh, now we can do that. Oh, actually, so that will backlogs grow, do you think?
I think so, and that's the gentleman's paradox in action, where when you reduce the price, demand still goes up. But if you, I don't know how to phrase this, the best way of phrasing it, but if you imagine you've got a team of 10 people, and you're saying the only way I can do more is the only way I can double my productivity is to double the team size to 20. That's not true, because doubling the team size when get is 20 because of monolithic man month and the way that you don't add extra people. It doesn't, it's not a linear path. And B, it's just that's incredibly expensive and a massive gamble by the company. But what we're suggesting is with the same team investing in these skills, we will grow productivity in a way that the business can see it and they get that return on investment. So whereas you might have invested £1 in tech and we've got a return on investment of £1.50, I'm now suggesting that actually I'd really like to get that to £2.50 or even £3 per engineer, but I'm not asking you for more pounds. I'm going to try and do that through AI first, and the way the team are thinking, the way the team are operating. And then you're exactly right, because that doesn't live in isolation. So you need the design to go with that. You need the product decisions to go with that. You need the backlog to go with that. You need the PR process, the DevOps, everything needs to be scaled around it. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've had this discussion, mate, but the idea that actually a business can suddenly start getting critical advantage by keeping its budget the same, or actually potentially increasing it, because now there's a case for increasing it. Because it will. But you might not need to, because you might then outscale the rest of the business. That's what's fascinating about my role, is trying to scale it in a way that scales with the business and offers a business advantage. So again, you're going for the win-win-win. The engineer wins because they're growing their skills. The team wins because they're producing more, and the business wins because they're getting higher return on investment. You would be crazy if I said to you, each one of these engineers, for £1 you spend them, is going to give you £3, and you turn around to me and go, okay, we'll get rid of 2 of them then, because I don't want those £2 extra. You wouldn't do it. So it's that I think secures the demand for software engineering at the moment, and certainly in our team and our situation, and that's what I'm going to. So the counter argument to that, which I think Chris Odell told me about, said that you get these where you get very highly funded, massive VC funded startups where they're just chucking tens of millions into them, and they're just hiring hiring people, just like, open the door, get in as quickly as you can, I'll maybe do a test first just to make sure you but you've got this kind of massively scaling startups where they do have like this almost unlimited resource, and the reason why the VC is basically saying get there as quickly as possible, and actually they will run out of backlog. But they also, that's a model that may be more disrupted than where we're at, because that might be the case of actually you take, like with Claude Code and other stuff, you just go for the premium, the best engineers, and your comment you made earlier, will some engineers earn a lot more? That might be the space that those engineers play in, where the risk reward ratio is much higher, and 996 is the thing that's being battered around, or they're working 9 to 9 6 days a week, and that's kind of the buy-ins in 9 6 days a week. That's right, isn't it? But that's that might be the case of the super engineer that gets that VC funded money, that goes off that extreme example, and that's their trajectory for growth. But where we are, where we've already got kind of an established team and established product, and we're trying to build that product, the value proposition is very much like, literally for every £1 you give me, I'm giving you £1.50 back as a tech and product team. Can I get that to £2.50? Can I get that to £3? And that's, I think, my focus and drive, because then you're doubling down on your return on investment, or tripling your return on investment to the business, which is where I want to get us to. That makes sense. Yeah. But you're absolutely right. I think it changes the entire model of how you would VC back something. And maybe that, like I was saying about the one person unicorn, that might be, we've never been closer to that, because someone could just go and spend, £12,000 a day on cursor credits, Claude credits, and away you go. And maybe that will happen, and we'll see that this year. I don't know. But that outlier, I wouldn't say would prove all the other cases, if that makes sense. Yeah. Interesting. So we're getting towards the 1 minute to go. I'm looking at the clock up there, and it's 5 minutes late. Last question from Zoe Griffiths. Is there an AI tool that you use every day at work? I know you've been talking about Cursor. Can you give me some examples of other Is there anything else that you use?
Yeah, that's my sister, so hi Zoe. The one that has saved me loads. I take a lot of notes. My short-term memory is not the best, so I would fastidiously take notes during meetings. I was paying attention. I can multitask. I can type, but Granola has just literally changed everything. So it takes a transcript of the meeting for me, and it provides an AI summary, and it allows me to ask questions of the meeting, and allows me to edit the notes. It allows me to take notes alongside, and it kind of puts it all together. And at the end of the meeting, then I can go through and actually edit the note and sort it. And one of the things I've written, again, with Claude, is a syncing mechanism to get that into Obsidian on my notes. Is super geeky. But yeah, Granola is, as a product, is fantastic. And it's a great example of how AI can enrich something in ways that surprise and delight you. And I think I'm probably not overrating it by saying that saves me an hour a day. And the actual ability to get those mechanisms into my notes and to link them out to my other notes probably saves me about 30 minutes a day as well, which is ace. And yeah, the most powerful tool. Other than Cursor, just in case anyone didn't think I like Cursor.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ollie. That's
My
been
pleasure.
brilliant. We have run out of time. Which is great. I mean, we were sort of wondering if there'd be enough to talk about, but actually, it's just such a huge subject. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing everyone at the next one, whatever it is. We've got a number of different potential speakers from previous Agile on the Beaches who have said they might be interested in doing something like this and having this sort of ongoing discussion. So thanks very much for coming, everyone, and see you next time.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.